challenging the way we think, right? So from confusion means that the way that my world order, I love your question. Oh, Lucas, are you back? Can you hear us? So maybe we'll have Lucas and then I'll dive in. But if we think about what is confusion exactly, confusion is like the way that I thought the world worked and the way I approach it is not working. There's something out there that's bigger and it's like chaotic. And what does that require us to do? How do we navigate that? Do we then pull back and then deny the new confusing reality? Or do we learn more about it? And then that edge of how we navigate this unknown, right? You can see humanity having different relationships with the unknown, right? And how we navigate that, and whether we fight to continue to work with the known, or do we want to go in to discover the new, right? So that became a way of operating when I was 14, when my parents, divorced, and that my world just changed, right? So I had two choices that I saw. One is to grow and become stronger from the change, or melt down and try to get smaller and have, and kind of go like this. So I made a conscious choice to challenge myself to grow when my parents split up and my world cracked. And then that made the decision when I was 14 that I think just set the direction of my entire life, and left me with the kind of problems that Marcus had and we all have, of curiosity. There's always more to know, right? There's always more to expand. And the most important thing for me is to very deeply reflect on the way I think, and to assume that the way I think is a tool that can be innovated, and not to presume that the thinking I'm doing is the correct, or then what I know is accurate. It's just building on. And that's an operating principle that has continued to let me learn every day, and I've learned already from each of you, so thank you. So Lucas, we didn't get to you. How are you? Can you hear me?
Yeah, of course.
And
Sorry, my
yeah, please
microphone
please
is.
share your version. Hi.
I hope this is working now. I'm also
Yeah,
from
we can
Austria.
hear you great. We can hear you great.
Okay, perfect. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to this 5 days, and I'm really curious about what we or what we will learn to change our world we are currently living in and make this world a better place.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's kind of the journey that I'm on too. So we're in this together, brother. We're in this together. We're all here now in this together. And as I was saying, thinking about Earth, right? And thinking about us together as if we're together, imagining the future when we've all left Earth, and we're looking at it from that point of view. And then we're thinking about looking at Earth and our lives together here from before we came to Earth together, and looking at now from that vantage point of that future and past as a present reality to inform how now can be better, is a guiding principle. And it does not require anything with respect to a belief system, because we all know we were born and we all know we're going to leave this world someday, and what happens there or there as the thought experiment is something that has always been curious to me. So when I was 15, I started looking at different ways of contemplating and different ways of meditating and discovering how I can achieve a different orientation to myself and reality. Meditation, yoga, and I wasn't so interested in religious belief and what belief was right, because I was someone very young who saw the validity of everyone's point of view from some part of it. So my challenge of being curious is, how is it that some people believe one belief system is right and the other is wrong? when I can see right and wrong in both. It's just a matter of perspective. And then I became a student of all the different theories of change and all the different tools that humanity uses for personal transformation and human transformation, to then look at the juxtaposition between them. And that became kind of a lifelong study, even though I, entered into college in a major of science in chemistry and biochemistry. And then I got into computers, and that's another story. But today I am involved with, you might say, what do we do with the money we have on Earth? And it's we have roughly $250 trillion in the system of money, in the money game. But then if we just look at what is life on Earth, and the resources and the cities and the trees and the water and the air and the life support systems that make our bodies function, the soil, all of those things, what is that worth? And we can't put really a value on it, but we know that it's much more than the money system, right? So that became a real deep inquiry of mine. When I was 24, 10 years after that breakthrough moment, when I was 14, I was invited to give a talk at a conference in Los Angeles. So I live here in Santa Monica, and there's 88 cities in LA County, in Los Angeles County. And the counties between us, the Colorado River that go down to Mexico, and the Pacific Ocean, if you just go straight in, there's 2 other counties, San Bernardino and Riverside County, and mountains. So from the mountains and the river to the ocean, there's about 150 cities, each which have their own system of governance, but they're each somewhat different. And then that curious is this a city, Los Angeles? Is it a country? With our economy in this region is about 800 billion US dollars. And then if you look at the country of New Zealand, it's about 20 billion dollars. So on a scale of a city, but if you look like a country like New Zealand, is that a country economy? Is this a city economy? So those kinds of perspectives require looking at everything from all the different vantage points at once, and then evaluating the different belief systems around each of those pieces of data, became something very intriguing to me. So, Suresh, you're involved with space. You remind me of a story, which just came to mind when you were talking about space, because I was brought to NASA in Cape Canaveral by a colleague of mine that I was working on a project. Was it last year or the year before? But in any event, it was 2 summers ago, I think, or it was 1 summer ago. I mean, like, COVID has made, isn't it funny how COVID has made our time perception about reality? Like, before COVID is this blur, because our lives, I mean, literally, if you think anything having to do with going back, I have a sense from my point of view that is insanity, because the world has literally changed and it will never go back. So it's about forward better. And when we emerge from this cocoon, we're now in the process of designing what the butterfly looks like, right? Because we know as a collective what our hearts knows is true and good, and what we feel we're all growing toward, regardless of our belief systems. There's something in the uniqueness of a human being that is not superior to other organisms on Earth, because many of the attributes that we as scientists believe are unique to humans, there's more and more discoveries every every year that what we think was a uniquely human characteristic is actually in other animals as well. So then what is human, right? That is one of the questions that we will not answer easily, but you can be sure that 99% of the assumptions and the scientific theories about what human is compared to other organisms, you can be sure that those are incomplete and inaccurate in some ways. But because they're inaccurate doesn't mean that we should just throw it all out. We just need to look at where their gaps are and think about that thinking that led to that theory, so we can think better about what a new model of thinking is to then be more comprehensive, so as to look at the unique aspect of what a human organism and a human collective is as compared to the other life on planet Earth, and then think about that. Now, from that vantage point that I believe you all got, right? Everyone kind of with me? I know I'm kind of going through a lot of layers, but has anyone lost me? And I'm happy to just kind of bring us to clarity. And really, it's okay, because I go all over the place, you can see, but you're with me, right? Now, think about that point of view that we are in, looking at all those factors, and most importantly, reflecting on how we perceive ourselves as a collective. But then think about how you perceive the collective of humanity's capacity for intelligence and intelligent innovation, and innovating that innovation from a creative mindset. And then think about the mind of humanity, right? Think about yourself. And imagine the mind of every other human as a collective, as you think about the question of development psychology and human development, right? Now, can you actually separate the way you think and what you perceive the rest of humanity is and the way that it thinks? And if you can find that edge and really believe that you can see the distinction, and analyze that edge with reflection, just by observing it, you will see that it actually is not an edge, and you will not find it's like two oceans meeting. There is that time when you see those great, have you seen those pictures where two oceans are coming together, and there's that boundary where you see the green water and then the blue water? That's pretty bitchin'. I love that kind of stuff, because there is that, but then there's that moment when it starts blending and it does not have a separate edge. And that's really the way reality is. Yet you can see that your framework of thinking, when you really think about this way of thinking, is that edge, because that's what you were trained to think about, to find a reality perspective to organize yourself and to organize your relationship with Earth. And that is necessary. You don't want to ever think, well, you could think if you want, but I would say don't go there. You never, really benefit from judging the way you think. Probably the most important thing is, instead of judging the way you think when you realize its limits, is to then give up trying to defend the way you think and just explore the unknown, right? So then, isn't it fun? Like, maybe I'm just picking you, Dorothea, and then you, Martin Meintz. Tell us about what was your recent experience of where you remember discovering something that you didn't know, you were uncomfortable, and now you're comfortable because you've got a better sense of the situation. Just the first thing that comes to mind without even thinking about it. And it might be as simple as, like, you didn't know what marmalade was like until you tasted it, and it was great. What comes to mind as an example of that journey? Of anything that comes to mind at all? You will unmute, I think.
So I'm not unmuted now. So we just moved from our toxic home, like back in Amstetten, and I kind of experienced living in a family now, like having this feeling of home and feeling comfortable anywhere. And that is what I experienced last days. And I feel really comfortable. And I'm kind of lucky that COVID is now here because of homeschooling. So I can find my place to, yeah, to
Thank
be
you.
here. Yeah.
From uncomfortable to comfortable and
To
finding your place.
extremely comfortable. Yeah.
And Martin, Mites, I just picked you randomly by just looking at you. Are you there, brother? And if not, we'll pick up someone else. Okay. How about you, Maurice? You're right on my screen. You're just above, and you've got a similar MA name. MA. You.
Yeah.
What was the first thing that comes to mind, like just off the top of your head, when I said that situation where you were unknown and you're known and you're comfortable?
It has to be about my health. The whole situation with COVID realized me that I really need to focus on health. I never thought it was such a big deal, right? It was like, yeah, sure, I eat, I do some exercise, whatever. But I didn't really acknowledge that I was too overweight. I didn't exercise enough, didn't pay attention to what food actually does to you. And when I kind of discovered that, then because I've been struggling with my weight for 25 years. And when I actually put my mind to it and focused on it and learned about it and understood how it works, it gave me such a great insight in how I can then use it to my own benefit, and now also to others, because I also help other people with that as well. That I've actually lost almost 30 pounds within 3 months.
Wow.
So yeah, and I've never known that I would be able to do that, because that's like crazy, right? It's a great marketing advertisement, like lose 30 pounds in 3 months, but no one's going to believe it. But
Right,
if
right.
you really put your mind to it and focus on that and just let it happen to you, then it happens. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So what you're evoking for me as well, as I'm looking at the times that I have had to go through a health journey, right? All of us have health challenges. And to realize that every single point in my life, I've had to innovate and use different methods because I am different and the situation is different. And that requires a resilience as well. And I have been somebody, Suresh, I didn't finish my story about NASA. I mean, I got so sidetracked by curiosity. I'll get back to that. Maybe I'll tie it together. Okay, I'll tie it together. So I'll tell the story like this. Okay. Sorry, Suresh. Now this is where I'm like, you're watching me go, system shut down, like, hold on a second, red alert, because how do I crush these two stories together and tell something relevant to both of them? And my mind is like, well, what I was going to say to you, Maurice, is I became very curious about the science of innovation and the science of business innovation and business marketing innovation and success as entrepreneurship, and the success of economic development and economic and finance for good, which has been my field for 29 years, is how do we then invest our cash into systems and investment that improve from that point of view. So if you can take an advantage point of everything you've heard my perspective is, and then turning that toward the world of economics and finance, and to continue to look at all the layers, that became my science and discipline. And in 2002, I left working with the big investment banks. I worked with 3 or 4 big investment banks, Smith Barney, UBS, Payne Weber, Prudential Securities, and an institutional firm before that. So then I worked with 4 big investment banks over 11 years, and then I decided to go into private practice because 2 things. I did not want to work for a big institution. I learned the system inside myself, but also I wanted to serve individuals that cared about the values of how do we use our money for good. So I focused only on that, and I found it was better in an environment where I was self-organizing and running my own private practice. So that's what I've been doing since 2002. And I have about 60 people, households that I manage about $30 million and help them make decisions about investments. And always on the edge of where the innovation is going in this field of combining science and human development and money systems and economic systems and banking systems. All of that together is my science and my discipline and my curiosity. So in 2002, I started going to many different conferences, the Green Festival, the Green America Conference, the Socially Responsible Investing Conference, different kinds of technology and science conferences, local management conferences of how we manage a city, the mayor's office and all the regional development groups that are working on better business in California, technology events and all the people that are advancing technology. There was a group called the Association for Internet Professionals. I used to host their meetings at my office. So I'd go to about 20 conferences a year. And then I learned about the Natural Products Expo. And the Natural Products Expo was every year in two places, but in a big convention center in Southern California here, a place near Disneyland. Disneyland, you've all heard of Disneyland. Well, right next to Disneyland is this convention center that has enough room for like 3,000 to 5,000 booths. And each booth was a 10 by 10 usually, or sometimes the bigger ones, but they would be the most innovative companies that were doing organic food, natural products, supplements, herbs, nutritional supplements, all the kinds of things that Maurice and I would be like, oh, I'm not doing so well. Let's change my diet and let's add some new thing into it. But then at every booth, they would be selling their product, but not necessarily selling their product on this. They would be selling it to people who own stores. So the scientist and the CEO and the finance person were there, and you could talk to the leadership of every single company. So I would spend 3 days walking through and watching every company and go, oh my God, they succeeded in a new tomato sauce and they're making 3 times more money than last year. And they're growing on a trajectory of having a 10x return on tomato venture capital. Like, who would think that investing in tomato sauce is an innovation that makes you 10x return? That is crazy from the standpoint of venture capital, but I saw it happen so many times. I'm like, oh my God, you guys grew. So like, let's do a fund around food systems and innovation. So then that led me to become an expert in that field enough as an amateur. So, then last year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I met a man who was an innovator in indoor agriculture. And his system is to take plants and put them in a tube. So you take a tube of soil and you put holes in it, right? And then you put the plants, they grow out of the tube, but then you have a plant growing in all directions and you turn the tube. And then the plant has to then keep itself from falling apart by maintaining its the fiber and the strength. But that continuous effort requires the plants to continue to survive and adapt, and that makes more nutritious plants. So he had a lab at the NASA Cape Canaveral to help figure out how to grow vegetables in space. And then the guy that runs that building of that lab is someone that he wanted me to go meet with him about discovering how do we do business in space to help Earth more. So me and him, and he brought a man who is a hemp farmer, but also the psychoactive farmer who's regenerative, focused on using agriculture to improve life support on Earth and biodiversity and soil. So that person was there, but talking about growing industrial hemp in space for the fiber. And then also somebody who's one of the leading experts on AI, Neil Sahota, who used to he was part of IBM Watson. So imagine us together talking about growing vegetables in space, but I'm interested in only about Earth. So if we take your concept of a moonshot, why go to the moon? We're already on a planet. So what about Earth shots? Rethink that whole paradigm, that we don't need to figure out how to populate Mars first. We need to ensure that our civilization will last long enough to innovate a technology system that will enable us to go to another planet. But if we don't, then we're probably not going to get there. So there's this kind of dystopian theory that humans will destroy Earth, so we got to get ready for Mars, because once Earth is a shithole, we're going to be able to go to find another planet, and we got to get on with that. But there's a missing step, making sure that humanity gets along well enough with our biosphere so we can actually get to that advanced civilization. And what does that mean? What does that mean? Well, going back to our understanding of ourselves and human and animal relationships. Of course, does anyone know about what the word the beagle refers to as a name of a ship? Does anyone know what the word beagle, the beagle, you know what a beagle is, a little dog, you know? How do you say it? Who has the name of the word beagle in their language that I wouldn't know?
I don't know. We call them beagle as well. The dogs, the Snoopy.
Okay, so the beagle was the name of the ship that Darwin was on, and he was studying animals and plants across planet Earth and came up with the theory of evolution, which I think is pretty sound. Yet, in the mid 1800s, people took the idea that survival of the fittest, which is a very accurate nature reality, but then projected that how that works is from people and animals competing against each other. But that is an organizing principle to achieve innovation, that competition is necessary, is true. There is that struggle, but competition was not the predominant factor. It was one of many factors, and cooperation was the factor that Darwin cited many, many more times for evolution of species. But you know, thinkers don't always take into account that which they learned from their progenitors. They take what they understood and project onto it and grab what makes sense and then make a new theory. And that's what, you know, Aristotle did before Plato, and Plato did before his teacher Parmenides. I don't know how to pronounce that name, but Plato's teacher had a worldview that Plato digested into a new framework of thought, and then Aristotle did the same thing. But we have a sense that they advanced that the followers were more superior and more sophisticated, so forget the old. But that's an assumption that is very, very problematic when you actually look at the earlier points of view of thought, because in almost every instance of a great thinker and then their students advancing a new theory, there is definitely an evolutionary arc. Without fail, we all can see that evolution of humanity. But two things happen that we need to challenge our current way of thinking and innovation. One, that the person who evolved the thought was working uniquely, and then they're the hero because they invented. There's some idiocy in that, because if you can think about the man who invented the light bulb, there were 500 additional scientists working on the same puzzle that he drew from that knowledge, and he extended that knowledge in a cooperative way somewhat. But our society said he's the hero because he's the one that invented it, but they didn't take into account all of the things that he learned from everyone around him and his teachers. So did he invent it, or was it a collective process that spit out a light bulb? One way to think about it. And another thing to reflect on that really made me curious about these ideas was, what was the worldview of the earlier thinker that we don't take into account? What do these ancient civilizations know about reality that we have become blind to because our mindset has gotten smaller in exactly the manner that we say Darwin competition. But hold on a second, if you actually haven't read his book, which I still haven't, but I've read enough material, and I've got to confess that, but I've read enough material of many people who've thought about it and read his material to say there's a different organizing principle. So we cannot assume two things, but we have. We've assumed that the new thinking is superior to the old, and that the old is already taken into account entirely in the new, which are inaccurate in both instances, almost across the board. But if we can look at the old and new as partners, then we don't need to be so egoic in our thinking. Like, I got something and screw the teachers in the past. Well, no, I got something in a community of inquiry, and I'm evolving the discipline because we all get to cooperate and benefit because everyone has a voice. But what a crazy thought that I don't need to get my grade over all the other students. Do you realize that that product of thinking is as a result of how you were educated, that you as a student uniquely need to come up with something to prove that you're smart over the other one, and then you rank yourself? Well, that's an industrial development paradigm that requires students to specialize and then become superior and climb over the others. But can you see there's an implicit scarcity in that hierarchy, as if there's not enough thinking for everybody else who has a different point of view? Can you see the kind of social Darwinism that says competition is necessary to find the smart ones and specialize so that they can be part of a machine of humanity? But then hold on a second, is humanity even a machine? Is the world a machine? That's a Newtonian concept that's already proven obsolete, yet most of our institutions are born out of these ideas. So this is the kind of stuff that has been informing my worldview all these years. And I just want to wrap up, because we're, I'm going on a bit, but you, Nikki, you knew I can just go on when you invited me to talk. So I'll pause here. I just want you to take a look at some books that I just grabbed. I've got a lot of books. I'm reading 3 or 4 at a time, usually, like where I'm like, oh, I'll read that one and get to that. And then I pick up the next one. I'm in a different mood. And then I get through 4 books, and then I go through another 4. I just want to share some books that I decided to grab, and I want you to think about them. And the first one I want to share is this book called the Dao Da Ching by Lao Tzu. And if you don't know this book, and if you haven't seen it, this is probably one of the best translations by this author, right? And it's beautiful. It's got incredible pictures, right? So why this is interesting is during that period in Chinese civilization, the great thinkers were thinking the society has become degenerate and we need to think more advanced. So Lao Tzu was a figure who wrote this book as a way of giving the leadership of the country more reflective and effective ways to lead. It's not a spiritual book necessarily, and it's not like a religious text like a Bible. So people think, oh, that's a Taoist book. Oh yeah, I'm a Christian, I don't read that shit. No, it's actually a manual on how to think better when you actually think about it. So I invite you to read this. Another book is called The Big Leap by a man named Gay Hendricks. And you probably have heard about this. I see you, Maurice, nodding your head. And this book was written for people that have achieved everything. But then they still have an argument with their husband or their wife or their daughter or their colleague, or they go through another cycle of failure, or they're struggling with alcoholism, because those are what he called upper limit problems. And the essence of this book I took away, and I want you to think about this very carefully. I expand every day in love, success, and abundance, and inspire others to do the same. That's the mantra of this book for executives. I've met a woman 30 years ago that wrote this book, Building a Win-Win World, which is based on the very things we're talking about. Hazel Henderson, she's one of my mentors. She's written quite a few books. And think about the idea of win-win world and then building a new civilization's technology. She was a cabinet level technologist working in the Carter administration with the Office of Technology Assessment. And then years later, I met Ron Schultz, who's an author, and he's put a lot of books together, and he asked me to contribute a chapter to this book called Creating Good Work, the World's Leading Social Entrepreneurs. And I was like, I didn't think of myself, and I still don't think of myself as a world leading social entrepreneur. So that part is kind of like, what? But the chapter I wrote is about the story of what I did since 2002 and 2012 on the work that I had done to apply the ideas you heard. And one of my favorite books ever is a book by an Indian saint in the state of Maharashtra around Bombay. It's called The Nectar of Self-Awareness. But then what's most thought-provoking alone is just the idea of self-awareness. Cultivating your capacity as a human can produce nectar. And that is the most juicy, life-giving immortality substance of your own awareness of yourself. Now, if you think about every single thing I said and bring it back to one thing, you are aware of yourself. And your awareness of yourself improves your relationship with yourself and others. And the more you make that the science of your life, of improving your self-awareness and finding the nectar in the most difficult relationships. And then going into the unknown, because usually when you're fighting is because you're fighting reality, because you don't want to go into the unknown and discover new, and you're trying to maintain the old thinking. So let it all go and discover yourself. That's my comment. In the few minutes we have left, I know if we had more time together, I want to hear all of your reflections and your curiosities about what I've said, because I know we've all sparked so many ideas, and I kind of lost track of time. I was actually intending that we would spend more time talking, but I kind of go on. So I want each of you to write down, and maybe Nikki, we can do an email thread between of us about what was the one thing that I want to then expand and innovate and create from my new awareness of my self-awareness that came about from looking at all of these books. So I recommend looking at all these thinkers, and please share one thing and we can make a little inventory. And maybe that's the project that I would recommend for the week. And maybe when we talk again in the future, we can learn how we all grew together. And that's what I would love to learn from you about how what I've said has improved your world, and then what you're doing can improve mine, because I have a place, I believe, in my world, which is the earth, for each and every one of us to work together. And I invite that from you. So moments, maybe one word. We have 2 minutes. How about one word each? Nikki, how do we want to go right at 10, which is fine with me.
Yeah, we'll see when Justin is joining. So
okay, great. So then just literally one word that expresses your feeling. So let's just go through. I'll just go through who I see. Johan, one word. What first one that comes to mind? Don't think about it.
Love.
Love. Dorothy, one word.
Self-esteem.
Thank you. Maurice, one word.
Abundance.
Sebastian, one word.
Curiosity.
Thank you. Marcus, one word. First thing that comes to mind. Oh, you're muted, brother.
The C, Marcus.
The C, Marcus. Disruption.
Thank you. Suresh, one word. You're muted, brother. Everyone unmute yourself. No, Suresh, you're muted. Thank
Still
you.
Muted.
Leave.
Leave is your word. Thank you. Martin, Mike. One word.
Thoughtful.
Thoughtful. Thank you. Neil, one word.
Understand.
Understand. Thank you. Jonas, one word.
Opportunities.
Thank you. Marcus, one word.
Humanity.
Humanity. Beautiful. Lucas.
Goals. Goals.
Goals.
Yeah.
Goals.
Okay, great. Thank you. Marco. Marco. Hi. I know. I love Marco.
So my word is science.
Beautiful. Christine's one word. What is it? Serendipity. Is that what that is? No? Splendidly? I can't read it.
Serendipity is Sri Lanka.
Can you put it one more time to the camera and can read it?
Yeah, one more time. I want to see.
Similarity.
Similarity. Yeah, love it. Justin, we're finishing up. One word that inspires you today.
Friendship.
Beautiful. May we be friends. Christian. One word, brother.
You're
Oh,
muted.
you're muted.
You're still muted.
Music.
Music.
Wow.
And Nikki, close us with one word.
Jazz.
Jazz. Thank you all. Thank you all for your time and attention today. What a joy to be with you, and a pleasure to share my passion and my life and joy.
Thank you for the ride. Thank you so much, Greg.
Until next time,
Thank you.
all. Blessings.
Talk soon, my
Thank
friend.
you.